what happens to the nutrients. And this gives you the 4 different food groups for you guys. This is your grease, salt, sugar, alcohol. That's your 4 food groups, usually for college kids. But this answers the question: we eat, we digest, we absorb, and then what happens to the nutrients? There must be a reason why they need them. Why we need them. And see, most of them are used to give us energy. That's mainly your carbs. And then some are used to make your structure and functional molecule. This is mainly your proteins. Some of the carbs are used to to help in this one. Some of the fats also. And then the rest are stored. This is mainly your fat plus some glucose, right? So here, just very briefly, your glucose, you use it now for energy, plus future is stored as glycogen. So glucose is burnt now, but there's also a stored form of glucose called glycogen. Your amino acids, you use it to make your whatever proteins you need. There is no stored protein. Any extra protein you eat is stored as fat. By the way, any extra on top of the glycogen, because you can completely fill your liver. It's not unlimited. Same with your muscles. Once you have filled all the glycogen stores, any extra glucose will also be stored as fat. And then your fat, the fat is just always stored first. There is no such thing as a fat that you will burn now. You always store it. It's stored. Okay? So, this topic talks about metabolism then. What happens to these nutrients? So, let's look at the glucose. Why is, I'm going to draw this cell. It's just a nice summary. Here's your cell. This is any cell in the body. What are the 3 parts of the cell? What's this? Yes, and then this is your
nucleus.
and this is the cytoplasm. Very good. So do you agree? Once the nutrients have been absorbed, they land in the cytoplasm. And I'm going to include the organelle here, the mitochondria, because this is our organelle for metabolism, right? So I'm going to write down the glucose here, the amino acids, and the free fatty acids. So they land in the cytoplasm. Do you follow? Makes sense, right? When you enter the house, you can't go straight to the bedroom or the bathroom. You enter the, what do you call it? The foyer. So that's the same thing here. These 3 nutrients can't go straight to the mitochondria, where we know that nutrients are converted to ATP. They land here. Once they land in the cytoplasm, they are met with an enzyme. They're met by an enzyme that only targets glucose. Has nothing to do with this one. They remain untouched. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is why glucose is referred to as your main source of energy. It is always the first nutrient that any cell will burn. Why? Because look at, immediately once it enters your cytoplasm, the glucose doesn't even have to wait to get there. It can be burnt in the cytoplasm immediately. That's what you call glycolysis. Why? Again, the answer is enzyme. There's an enzyme here already. It's called hexokinase. But there's an enzyme here that targets this one. Do you have an enzyme here that will target this? No. How about this one? No. You have to send this here to break this down. Result, you always burn your glucose first. Any cell in the body. That's why any book on nutrition always talks about carbohydrate breakdown first. Here, see? Okay? So, see, the first thing that happens is glycolysis. That's this one. It happens in the cytoplasm. By the way, this glucose, I remember, I think this was asked in the all these nutrients, but specifically glucose. Glucose has the tendency to escape. Like my dog, you have to put the collar, otherwise it can escape. So same with this glucose, okay? The first thing that happens once it enters, it gets phosphorylated. You convert it to G6 phosphate. See, it gets phosphorylated to G6 phosphate. In this G6 phosphate form, so immediately any glucose that enters the cell gets phosphorylated. G6 phosphate is called G6P. That's the first thing that happens. Lock it in so that there is no chance for it to escape again. The one, so all glucose molecules, once they enter the cell, they're locked in G6 phosphate form. Except for the one in the liver, it's also locked in G6 phosphate form. But in the liver, you have enzymes that can break away that phosphate so that it can go back in there. It can be released into the blood when you need it. Okay? So here we go. It's in G6 phosphate, and you can immediately burn it. It can undergo glycolysis. It's not going, it won't have escape. Then you try to pull it back. No more chance for pulling it back. It's just there. It's ready to be burnt out. And so there's a statement that once glucose is broken down in the body, it is forever lost. It is true. It's forever lost. It's gone. It's broken down to carbon dioxide, water, ATP, and energy, heat. Okay? So the first thing that happens is what you call glycolysis. We know that. Do you remember how glucose looks like? It's a 6-carbon compound. So it's C6H12O6, right? So don't forget, just complete. But it's a 6-carbon compound. When you break this, the first thing that will happen once it enters the cell, of course it's locked up into G6 phosphate. The first thing that will happen, break this into two. That's what you call glycolysis. And the product is called pyruvic acid. So the energy that we're talking about is actually stored in those chemical bonds. So when you break that, you're releasing the energy. And that energy is harvested to form your ATP. You see that? Okay? That's what you call glycolysis. Where did this happen? In the cytoplasm. Did it require oxygen? No, right? Because the organelle that requires oxygen is just the mitochondria. This is what you call anaerobic metabolism. You understand so far? So, one more time, the three nutrients, where do they land? They will all land inside my cells. Except I will immediately burn glucose because it's met by an enzyme right away. Is this met by an enzyme? No. No also for this one. So they have to wait to go here. In the meantime, you're already burning your glucose. What do you call that event? Glycolysis, where the glucose is broken down in half. And the product is called pyruvic acid. So in the cytoplasm alone, anaerobically, meaning no need for oxygen, I already have ATP. But there's still energy here. See, this is pyruvic acid. There's the other pyruvic acid. There's still energy in those chemical bonds. We still can get ATP from them. The problem is to take advantage of energy here is to send them to the mitochondria. You understand? That is called Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. So these two events happen only in the mitochondria and happen only in the presence of oxygen. In the absence of oxygen, you cannot. This cannot happen. You cannot even break down the fat or the amino acids. That's why you'll die. Because this ATP produced by glycolysis doesn't last you for a long time. Besides, in the absence of oxygen, so this stays as acid, pyruvic acid. Then it leaves your blood and it becomes lactic acid. You remember when you're talking about muscle metabolism? And that lactic acid can lead to acidosis and exhaustion, because acid is not good for any part of the body that's exposed to it. Okay? So, but if there is oxygen, this is what happens. Let's look at this Krebs cycle. What is this Krebs cycle? The Krebs cycle is also referred to as citric acid cycle. This is nothing but a series. So the thing that reminds me of this one is the subway. When you ride in the subway, there's several stops, right? You get off the subway. So that's the same thing with this one. I'm not going to ask you to memorize the different substrates. Another term for this one is called citric acid cycle, because the first substrate is called citric acid. Let's look at what happened. There's your pyruvic acid. See? By the way, very important for you to note. Yes, we're going to send this to the mitochondria. This is the event that happens in the mitochondria, okay? But there's one problem. The mitochondria only recognizes or lets in or can only break down or can only process a compound called acetyl-CoA. Don't forget that. This is the only compound that the mitochondria can use to give you your energy. So, the glucose, I have to convert it to this one. The fat, I have to convert to acetyl-CoA if I want to burn that. Same with my amino acid. It has to be in acetyl-CoA form, no other form. So, look at your pyruvic acid, so that I can send it to this Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. First thing to happen, decarboxylate it. Break down that one carbon, that's what you breathe out. Right? And so in acetyl-CoA, it can enter. It can be processed right here in the mitochondria. So look at what happens. How do you break down? How do you get energy? You do it one bond at a time. They say the reason why we have to do it step by step, one carbon at a time, a series of decarboxylation reactions. See? Break down one carbon and harvest slowly the energy, is because if we broke down all the bonds all at the same time, most of them will be released as heat. You just wasted all of that glucose. So that's why we have to do it step by step. So you broke down the carbon, you released and you harvested some of it as ATP, but there will still be the protons, right? It's made up of hydrogen, right? C6H12O6. You still have this. There's still energy. Remember atoms? So when you break down, there's an exposed, the electron. That's the one that's so hyper, there's energy there. Where are you going to transport them? You have to transport those electrons. They go through an electron transport chain. This is the easiest way to understand this Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. So look at this electron transport chain. See? Look at this one. The electrons will be harvested and they will go to this electron transport chain, which is part of your mitochondria. And and right here, just where did the electrons come from the atoms exposed, right? Look at the terminal electron acceptor. It's oxygen. If you were a bacteria or any kind of microscopic organism, you have other terminal electron acceptors. For some, it will be sulfur. For some, it will be nitrates. That's why bacteria can survive underwater or under anaerobic, but we cannot. We require oxygen. That's the reason we need oxygen. It's the one that accepts terminal electron acceptor. Where will this once they've been stripped of energy? Remember that I know about atoms. They do not remain unstable when they're in the body. They have to find a way to be stable, and this is how they find their way to be stable. Again, the oxygen accepts the electrons. So what is the final breakdown product of metabolism? If you look up your glucose, it's just made up of CH and O, right? So breakdown products, carbon dioxide, water, there's ATP and heat. Do you understand? I don't want you to memorize just for the sake of memorizing. It's better for you to picture in your head what's going on. Okay? One more time, look at, there's your glucose, you have glycolysis, you break it down in half. Why always glucose? The answer is enzyme. You don't have an enzyme that meets the amino acid or the fats in the cytoplasm. So immediately in the cytoplasm, you start burning your glucose. It's called glycolysis. Okay? Oh, the first step, don't forget, G6 phosphate, I keep forgetting. G6 phosphate, lock it in there. Then after that, the product is pyruvic acid. In the presence of oxygen, you can send this to the mitochondria. But the first step, convert it to acetyl-CoA. So decarboxylate, release one carbon dioxide. Just break it down one at a time. Then this one, you can send it to the Krebs cycle, which is just a series of substrates, right? That breaks down step by step, slowly break it down, release those two. Release, break down one, and then break down one. Then you release it. That's what you give off as carbon dioxide, right here. Then the electrons, because free electrons cannot escape as free electrons. Someone has to receive them. What receives them inside the mitochondria is this one, oxygen, because we're humans. If you're bacteria, it can be other than oxygen, right? But we're humans, this is the only one that can accept those electrons. So, what did you produce? You produce this one. What happens to this one, to carbon dioxide? This is a waste product. And if it remains in our body, it's dangerous. We can go into acidosis. How do we get rid of this one?
Exhale.
We breathe it out. That's why carbon dioxide is the stimulant for breathing. Because you have to breathe it out, carbon dioxide stimulates your respiratory system. This is why hyperventilation is not encouraged. You see? Because hyperventilation means you're blowing off that carbon dioxide, which is your stimulus for breathing. That's how your respiratory system is designed. You understand? And you breathe in the oxygen again, see? Because you used it for metabolism. So the oxygen you breathe in, you form the water, you pee it out. You have to keep replacing the oxygen. Very nice, isn't it? You replace the oxygen, you breathe out the carbon dioxide, which you produce right here. Okay? The water you pee or you sweat it out. The ATP you form is going to be used to power your activities. And look at the cycle of life. And then, of course, there's heat. The heat, what's the purpose of that heat? Thermoregulation. Because all your organs, remember, we're just talking about the functions, but they require ideal temperature. Your heart pumps all of the things that we study. They require ideal temperature to do that. You know you're going to die from hypothermia. That's what the purpose of that heat is for. Look at the cycle of life. What happens to the carbon dioxide that you breathe out? There's your plants, right? Isn't the carbon dioxide going to use that plus the energy from your sun? And then you water your plants. Carbon dioxide plus water. The plant will reform it into your carbs again. And then you eat the plant. Same thing again. It's just a cycle. It's unbelievable. You understand this process? Do you have any questions? Again, I don't require you to memorize. I want you to understand. You see why it's important to breathe out, right? Now you see why carbon dioxide is the trigger for breathing. It's not oxygen. Carbon dioxide is the trigger for breathing. Where did you get your oxygen? RBC, right? So when you have problems with oxygen, it's the RBC that responds. But you'll die without oxygen because it's the one that's the key to accept all of these electrons. Otherwise, the electrons can be harmful. Okay? So, because we are regulated by mainly glucose, you remember, I want you to remember, we're going to talk about the two hormones later on. So, what happens was in times of plenty when you just ate, or right after a meal, what's going on? Glycogenesis is going on, right? Glycolysis too. But then in between meals, I'm thinking glycogenolysis. So in between meals, glycogenolysis is going on. You want to make sure your glucose level is normal. Why? Why is it very important to always have normal circulating glucose? You remember your neurons? The neurons do not store glucose. They have no storage shed in their cells. But it's their main source of energy. So they are always dependent on the blood. That they are always making sure that they can get glucose from the blood. That's why you have your liver. This is why people with liver problems can become can have nervous system problems too. Okay? So, you have any questions on glucose? You understand glucose 6-phosphate? You understand acetyl-CoA? Remember, the mitochondria, okay, will not use this or this or this. What will it use? Acetyl-CoA. That's what it processes. Okay? Now, let's go to our facts. If we have, this is a nice summary, by the way. It's the same, we just discussed this one. Now we're going to look at fats. The problem, fat is a long chain, remember? Fat is the same. What are the atoms that make up your fat? It's also CH and O, remember? Except it's longer chain. It's anywhere from 16 to 18 carbons long. It's too long. It's also H and O. But it's instead of 2:1 for H, it's maybe just it's not 2:1. So maybe it's C18, H30, O5. It's not 2:1. Okay, not 6. So this is a fat. You know, it's not 2:1. But it's still the same. I predict the breakdown products after you process this, I predict it will still be the same. CO2, H2O, ATP, and I don't see anything else, right? Okay, so the thing about fat, let's look at how it enters the body. first. Okay? For fat to be processed, I want you to look at this one. So remember that your free fatty acids are insoluble in water, and blood is mainly soluble. So we have to convert it to a soluble form first so that it can enter your cells. The way to get to your cells is through your blood. So the first thing for to happen for fat is to convert it to a lipoprotein. In plain lipid form, it's insoluble in water, like this. But you add a protein to it, it becomes soluble in the blood. There's no danger of it settling out. You understand? So there's a few lipoproteins that I want you to know. Don't forget, write down in big letters. All lipoproteins are soluble in water. The plain fatty acid, insoluble in water. But all these lipoproteins are soluble in water, meaning blood. What are these lipoproteins? This is your chylomicron. This is your VLDL. LDL, are you familiar with LDL, HDL? Mm-hmm. Those are your lipoproteins, but include this. Don't forget, a lot of students forget this. What's this? This is a lipoprotein. Is this soluble? Yes. Only the plain fatty acid insoluble. So let's look at the fate of fat, or how do we process the fat in the body. Look at, this is my small intestine. This is how I absorb, right? We absorbed our fats in your lymphatics, remember? And while this is how our lipoproteins look like, by the way, like this. So the fats are right there inside, and the protein is the one that's sticking out so that it can be soluble. So when it enters your lymphatic, it's the individual fat. While it's in the lymphatic, the lacteals, it's then bound to a protein. Then it becomes like this. You understand? Mm-hmm. So the first type of lipoprotein that it becomes is called chylomicron. I'm going to go back to this picture over here. Okay? So I absorbed the fat, just lots of fat from my diet. And I absorbed it, very rich, from my diet. It gets converted to a lipoprotein. The first lipoprotein is called chylomicron. See? From the intestine. So what do you think? The chylomicron of these different lipoproteins, you agree? This chylomicron must be the richest in the two important fats, the triglycerides and cholesterol. It must be the richest because I just absorbed it. That's why it's called dietary lipoproteins. You just ate this. So of the different lipoproteins we're going to discuss, this one is the richest. You follow so far? Now, it's going to, see, then it finally drains into the bloodstream. What is it carrying? This chylomicron that's very rich in everything we just ate. You follow? When it drains into the bloodstream and it enters my body, okay, it's just like the newspaper delivery boy, where it has lots of newspapers and makes frequent stops, dumps the newspaper to each house, right? And that's the same thing that's happening here. Look at your chylomicron. See, there's an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase that will remove the lipids from your chylomicrons. You remember your adipose? That's how the adipose gets its fat. So can you picture in your head? You absorb your fat in the lymph. As it enters and joins my blood, it will be converted to chylomicron. So it's rich in this and this. Which of the two gives you energy? Yes, very good, the triglyceride. Which of the two is stored as adipose? This one also. Remember, right? So, as your heart pumps this chylomicron to the rest of the body, this enzyme, lipoprotein lipase, actually takes away the triglyceride because this is the one that I store in my adipose. You understand? Okay? So, look at, so there is a stop. There's always this main headquarters. When it makes a stop in the liver, it doesn't look like chylomicron anymore because I have given away triglycerides. It's now stored in my adipose. So when it gets to the liver, you don't call it triglyceride. It is now called VLDL. Does VLDL have lots of triglyceride? No more. You have unloaded it. So it maybe has just 3 checks, but the check for cholesterol is still high. Then when it leaves the liver, it's just another round. It's just always another round trip. Goes back. It's still unloading. It's always unloading the triglyceride. So when it goes back to the liver, you now call it no more VLDL, but you now call it LDL. So what do you think? With the LDL, I have unloaded more triglycerides. Maybe there's just 1 check now, but still cholesterol is very high. That's why LDL is called the bad cholesterol. Okay? HDL, you know how I remember H for heaven? If you're good, you go to heaven. See? And the opposite is L. Someone said L for Lucifer. If they're opposite, I hope you remember that L must be the bad. H for heaven. Do you follow so far? One more time. Look at, I just absorbed it from my diet. Then what's happening? Immediately in the lymph, it's converted to a lipoprotein called chylomicron. When it goes to my circulation, the heart pumps it. Then the adipose tissue will grab the triglyceride. So by the time you get to the liver, some of the triglyceride has been already stored in your adipose. So you call it now VLDL. This one has less triglyceride, but still fairly large amounts of cholesterol. Make another round trip. Triglycerides, again, always triglycerides, not cholesterol because you don't use cholesterol for energy, only triglycerides. See? You store it again. When it goes back, now it looks different. You call it LDL, bad cholesterol, because it's loaded in cholesterol. At the same time, I want you to look at this one. See? There's a separate side round trip right here. You see this one? The liver makes an empty HDL shell. Empty. And it releases it into the circulation. And the job of, see, the HDL shell will pick up the cholesterol from the LDL. So it's like they meet each other, and then it will pick up the cholesterol here to deliver it to the liver. Because the liver is the one that uses that cholesterol to make what? To make your bile, to make your estrogen, testosterone, to make your vitamins, whatever. It's the liver that does that. You see? So that's why this is heavenly, good cholesterol. This is bad cholesterol. You understand? Now let's predict what happens when there's a liver problem. So with alcoholics, a sign of liver failure is in different stages. The first thing that you will notice among alcoholics is called fatty liver. If I ask you to define what is fatty liver, it means the liver is fatty. Why? The fat stops there. You can't process it anymore. Remember, the key is the liver has to process this. The arrow is pointing, but all these events happening right here, right? So if this is failing, it's filled with fat and can't proceed any further. So what will you notice when you do ultrasound? Fatty liver. That's the first sign of liver failure. Not only among alcoholics. Like my sister is a breast cancer stage 3, so she has liver failure from chemotherapy. So fatty liver. So that's why with drugs, don't just self-medicate yourselves. You may end up with that. But fortunately, the liver is made up of active cells, right? So they can recover. But you want to stop whatever you're doing because if not, then it will proceed to fibrosis, it will start hardening, and then finally cirrhosis, which is end stage. But if I ask you this one, very easy to explain. It hardens, it's no longer able to do what's supposed. In addition to fat processing, it's also important for glucose, right? Metabolism. It stores the glycogen. You can also have then. You can have protein deficiency. You can have uh, diabetes. All of that just because your liver is no longer working. If I ask you to define fatty liver, can you define that? Right? The fat just stops there. Okay, now that we know how the fat entered our cells, let's look at how we use it. Remember, we always need to have fat. Why? What is that one organ that uses fat only? The heart. The heart, remember? The heart prefers fat. The brain prefers sugar. The heart prefers fat. So what did we say about the Krebs cycle? See, yes, I can send it to the Krebs cycle, but the fats have to be converted to acetyl-CoA. How do you do that? Remember, it's a long chain. I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's very long, and the Krebs cycle, there's no other way to break down your nutrients except your mitochondria, right? But what does the mitochondria recognize? Only this one, which is a 2-carbon compound. And I can break it. All your fats are even numbers. So you can break it down, right? Not they start here. The first step then for fat metabolism is called this one, beta oxidation. The terminal carbon is always referred to as alpha, beta, break, oxidizing. Then this becomes alpha, beta, break, alpha, beta, break, break, beta oxidation. Now you have lots of acetyl-CoA. You see that? Then you can send that to the mitochondria. There's a problem with fat metabolism. You just like the bathroom, is the if all the stalls are filled, what do you do? Do you just barge in there and say, let's share the toilet? Do you do that? You don't do that. What do? You wait for your turn. That's the same thing with this one. All of a sudden, the mitochondria will be flushed with all of these 2-carbon compounds, acetyl-CoA compounds. While they're waiting for their turn, some of them may combine to form 4-carbon compounds called ketone bodies. That's why the danger of fat metabolism, don't forget this for your test, is you may go into ketosis. Ketosis is a problem with fat metabolism. So the zero carb, just fat breakdown, fat whatever, you notice that people who play with their diets, sometimes they become different. It's a personality concern. They become, what do you call it, obnoxious or annoying, sometimes to the point of being paranoid, because they can go into ketosis. And this is what they do with the, what is that, the fat burning pill? They sell that, what do you call that, in the store? Hydroxycut or something. It's a lot of them. the side effect is ketosis. You understand? Do you understand how you can have, acetic acid, ketone, acetone, the one we use for our, what do you call it, manicure, right? Acetone. The smell, it smells fruity, and that's what's referred to as fruity odor. And it leads to mental fogginess. Have you heard of that mental fogginess? Especially with diabetics, right? With diabetics, they cannot use the glucose. So what do? They rely on fat. But when they rely on fat, they are ideal candidates to go into ketosis. And you smell that in their breath. Keto breath, a fruity odor. So you know that you need to give them insulin because they're not able to process the glucose, you see? Mental fogginess. I remember that was a question in your digestive worksheet. Someone, what explain, or what is the explanation for mental fogginess? That's because you go into ketosis. But if you, so don't rely too much on fat metabolism. There's just a normal fat metabolism going on in the body. The problem with ketosis is when you're just relying entirely on fats. But can you break it down? Yes, see, it's two carbon compound. Send it to the Krebs cycle, send it to electron transport chain. What's the breakdown products of fat metabolism? Isn't it the same? Carbon dioxide, I see, right? Plus water, plus ATP, plus heat. Is there anything else? No. Well, possible ketone bodies, right? But if you send it here and it's just normal fat metabolism, you get the same breakdown products as your glucose. Do you see anything harmful here? No. I can breathe this out. ATP, sweat. Use this for energy. Heat, I use for metabolism. So no problem with that one. You see that? Now let's look at our amino acids. Amino acids can also be used for metabolism. We know that. We get 7 calories per gram from proteins also. But the problem with amino acids is look at. So, this one right here. Look at your amino acids. They have this amino group, right? So, they do have this. When I send this, see, very easy because they're small. Break it down to acetyl-CoA, no problem. I can send that, this one. But to be able to do that with any amino acid, you have to take this out. This is what you call deamination. So you have to take out that amino group of the amino acid. That's what you call deamination. That's the first step. See? In protein metabolism, deamination. So you take, where's my deamination? So you take out, so you deaminate it first. For fats, it's called beta oxidation. Here, you deaminate it first, you take out the amino group. Why? Because again, you're human. You're not bacteria. Bacteria can process this. No problem for them. But for us, we cannot. We have no enzymes that can break this down. Because God didn't make our amino acids to be used for energy. He meant for us to use it as building blocks for whatever proteins we need. But if we need to break it down, we have to take this out, deamination. What's left? Acetyl-CoA. You saw that, right? Send it again. No problem. So what's left, we can break it down. We still get your carbon dioxide, etc., etc. But we have this one to worry about all the time with amino acids, all the time. That's why if we want to do protein metabolism, we have to make sure, see, oh, there it is, deamination. We have to make sure that your liver is healthy because then this one is what you call ammonia. The liver will take care of converting this to urea. The urea will be sent to your kidney to get rid of it. So, if we do protein metabolism, see, this is what I mean by automatic. It's an automatic thing. The kidney just automatically gets rid of it. What does the kidney use to get rid of it? How do you get rid of it? But urine, right? Urine, pee. So what's the main component of urine? Water. Very good. So that's why if we do protein metabolism, it's automatic. You get dehydrated. The liver doesn't know whether you have enough water in your body or not. All it knows is if there's urea being said, it will just get rid of it. It will use water. So you better tell your friends if they're doing protein, whatever, drink extra water to make sure that you're not compromising your blood volume. Otherwise, you go into liver failure. That's when you develop kidney stones. We're going to study the renal system next. Do you have any questions with this one? But other than the urea, the amino group, what else do you have? Carbon dioxide, no problem, breathe it out. Water, sweat, BP, ATP for energy, heat, thermoregulation. This is just the pain in the butt if we do protein metabolism. If we do fat metabolism, you saw what your problem will be. Ketosis. Okay? So this one is a nice summary of all the breakdown. See, they're all interconnected. What is the key is acetyl-CoA. That's the one that's recognized by your um, mitochondria. I like this because it already tells me my ammonia, then it tells me my ketosis for your fats, my carbohydrates, the thing here, lactic acid, in case you don't do it aerobically. So now our life, we vacillate between being between types of 20 called the absorptive state and then in between called the post-absorptive state. And there are two hormones that's very important, insulin and glucagon. So during the absorptive state, insulin is the predominant hormone. In the post-absorptive state, glucagon is the predominant hormone. I'm sure this slide is very self-explanatory. When you just ate, it makes sense. Glucose is the main nutrient you're burning. The others you're storing. This is just very easy to understand. And insulin is the predominant hormone. And then in between meals, glucagon is the predominant hormone in the post-absorptive state because now you didn't eat, so you're relying on the glucose you stored in your liver and in your muscle. But the one in the muscle is for exclusive use of muscle only. Okay? The last part of this chapter talks about thermoregulation. So we're talking about metabolism, how we use these nutrients, but you know that you need to have normal body temperature always. This is part of homeostasis. If you are normal, like I said, I don't care whether it's very hot or very cold outside. Stick a thermometer right here in your axilla, check. It doesn't matter. If you're healthy, that temperature remains constant, even if it's freezing outside. That is because you have a working nervous system. So, your thermostat, right, you will die from hyperthermia. Why will you die from hyperthermia? What is the explanation? What is it? When your temperature is high, what do you think? What are the events? What can happen when the temperature is high? What do you think is going on in your body? Why can you possibly die? You continue, yes, you denature your proteins, increase temperature, right? And then when your temperature is high, don't you think so? Metabolism is high. So it's like everything is overdrive inside. You can go into exhaustion and you just try heat stroke, heat, there's another one. Heat, there's another term. But anyway, that's what's going on, right? You eventually you run out of nutrients because everything is going in overdrive, all your cells. You just die from hyperthermia. How about hypothermia? They have opposite, right? How can you die from hypothermia? What are you going to write? It's very good, right? Hypothermia, slow down until it stops. So you need to have normal temperature. Okay? Do that experiment. Stick a thermometer there. Go everywhere. Go out in the sun. Go in the cold. Check your temperature. It's normal. It didn't change at all. This is your brain. This is what it does for the. Remember the hypothalamus? The hypothalamus has a thermostat and it regulates the temperature within normal. If it goes up or goes low, it's detected by your hypothalamus and it regulates it through either sweating if it's hot or constriction if it's too cold. Okay? And that's the end of this chapter. This, oh, by the way, this is nutrition, and I teach nutrition too, but nutrition is another 12-week course. But I know that there's that My Play. I like to use this one to remind you, you need to have, if you want to stick within the nutrition, why do they have this? Why are we supposed to, everything in the internet, even the first aid, they're always promoting proper nutrition. The goal of nutrition is a science it's the newest of all the branches of science. It's the newest because the goal of nutrition? To prevent chronic diseases as you get old. So to promote healthy life. Degenerative diseases, a lot of the diseases, the top five, heart disease, diabetes, and even depression. This can be nutritionally regulated, right? Or prevented even. So that's why they have this. But I don't like the new nutrition picture, which is the plate, because they don't have the guy exercising. Exercise is so important. Exercise is actually a prescription now. They say to maintain your weight, you exercise 30 minutes. How many times a day? At least three, but they are now pushing for every day. If you don't want to, no, 30 minutes every day just for metabolism, healthy life. To prevent from gaining weight, you want to up it to 45 minutes a day. To lose weight, at least 60 minutes every day, they say. Okay? Now, since we're talking about too much fat, I know you know this, BMI. Everyone is talking about BMI, right? There's a healthy BMI 18.5 to 29.9, right? And then below that, you have a low BMI, about here 18.5 to 24.9. And so then 25, you don't need to memorize this one. 29.9, this is called overweight. And then 30 and above is called obese. Okay? So why do we want to target this normal BMI? What is BMI anyway? What are the two parameters involved in measuring your BMI? It is? Yes, very good. It's weight over height, right? That's how you calculate your BMI. How heavy are you for your height? So let's look at where this weight is coming from. The sources can be from your carbs, right? Your proteins and your fats. What do they say? If your BMI is high, they equate that. Did they equate it to too much this, or this? Too much fat, right? That's what they say. If your BMI is high, you must have too much fat. They will ask, why? Why is it too much fat? What do you think? Do you remember? Carbs, you store it as glycogen. Do you have unlimited storage of glycogen? No, right? Proteins, you store it as fat. Which of the three do you store unlimited? This one, right? You can even make new fat cells. So, if your BMI is high, if you're heavier for your height, which of the three do you think will be in excess? The fat. That's why excess BMI in general is equated to excess fat. But for athletes, or there's a lot of people who are very, very muscular, they're meaty, they may have a high BMI. That's why, in addition to BMI, this is not the only one that they use now. They also use measurement of waist circumference. You know that, right? For males, if it's over 42, and for females, if it's over 38. It's this fat that we worry about. You know that there's the apple fat and the pear fat. Guys are mainly apples and girls are mainly pears. When we gain weight, we gain our weights in our butt. And for guys, it's this fat that we worry about. For some reason, this adipose right here is more easily dislodged than the fat here. So if it's easily dislodged, it's easy to enter your circulation. That's why we want to make sure we always pack the unsaturated, the good fat, the unsaturated than the saturated. Okay? So you look at the BMI, you look at the waist circumference, then you proceed from there. Not just by looking at the BMI alone. And what else do you consider? You have to consider medical history. You have to consider family history. Are you predisposed? You have a tendency to have cardiovascular diseases, etc., etc., etc. You have any questions? We're done with our digestive chapter 23 and 24.